Hi, I'm a little bit tired. I was weeding my garden today, and while I was weeding it, I was picking out all of the plants that I didn't think should be there. My problem was that I found one or two that I wasn't sure whether they were weeds or whether they were plants. And so I'm just going to have to wait until the end of the year to see what kind of fruit comes out of it. Now, that's the story Jesus was talking about when he talked about the parable of the weeds and the grain. So he told them the story about a field of grain that was sabotaged in the middle of the night, where someone evil came along and threw in bad seed to try and make it so that the grain wasn't quite as wonderful as it could be. So people got all excited and said, "So what do we do? Our grain is ruined." And he said, "No, don't worry. Let the good seed grow up with the bad seed, and at the end of time, we'll harvest it all and we'll separate it because then we'll know what it is. Because you can't really tell at the very beginning whether you've got a weed or you've got grain."
Okay, the parable that we just did in Children's Circle was used by Augustine to talk about the church. Can you kind of flesh that out a little bit? Okay.
Well, as I understand it, Augustine Augustine drew his view of the church partly from this parable. And his idea of the church was that the church will inevitably and always be a mixture of good and bad, of saints and sinners, and that we shouldn't seek to remove all of the evil or wicked or ungodly people from the church, or we'll make a mess of things. And that to a large extent we have to simply allow the church to be this mixture of true Christians who know God, and in other words, those that are like wheat and those that are weeds, and to allow them to grow together. And because we're not going in the place of God where we can judge properly either in many cases.
What is Jesus trying to tell us by dividing us like that?
Well, that is a good question, and there are many scriptures that we wrestle with, and I suppose some of those texts in Matthew are some of them. We shouldn't be afraid of the idea of judgment or of separation of good versus evil, because it's part of the Bible's assertion that God is not morally indifferent. And that would be the alternative, or at least one of the alternatives, it seems to me, that God couldn't care less about what people do to one another, or when horrible things are done, when people are, in fact, evil doers, and they do horrendous things. And to believe in a God who cares is to believe in a God of judgment, who doesn't just shrug his shoulders or who is not simply indifferent. God cares about what's good and loving and just and kind. And in this life, many horrible things are done to innocent, weak, helpless people. And so there's a kind of a warning in this parable too, that we shouldn't be too easygoing or cavalier about how we live our lives as if God doesn't care, because God does care.